Hello, it's Karen Berniston here with my monthly designer challenge video. The theme this month is bouquets, and what I wanted to do with my card is revisit a technique that I taught in our January 2025 Zoom class, and that is an alteration of the tag book pop-up for a card assembly with a little bit of a different look to the pop-up. So here's the inspiration card. This is the Life is What You Bake It card. Happiness is a warm cookie. So I taught this one as a Zoom class. There may still be kits available for this, depending on when you're watching this video. So check the description box for more information. I am a huge fan of pattern paper, so I went stash diving and I found these two beautiful pieces of 49 and Market paper. It's a little bit thicker paper, which was wonderful, so I could make the pop-up out of it as well. So I picked my papers and then I just went to my solid cardstocks and found some colors that matched those papers. I'm making a 5x5 square card. So I started with a piece of cardstock 10 inches long by 5 inches tall and scored it in the middle for folding. And then to that, I'm adding 2 panels of the pattern paper. They are each 4.5 inches square. Now I'm ready to die cut the pop-up for inside, and I'm going to switch to this other pattern paper. Now I want a 4-inch strip, and I'm going to choose this bottom section because it has the most decoration in it. Now the 4-inch strip is, there's a reason for it, and that is because the pop-up die from the tag book is longer than 6 inches. But if you locate it in the upper left corner of a 4-inch strip of pattern paper, then you can flip that die around and use the lower right, and you can get both cuts in that 12-inch strip. The next I am going to cut is the arm decor piece. So I'm just using some of my leftover pattern paper. Now one thing about that die is that it does have a direction to it, meaning if you are using pattern paper, you want to flip the die around between cuts so that you're cutting one with the taper going to the right and one with the taper going to the left. With the tag book, I wouldn't skip the arm decor pieces. They are decorative, but they're also for strength because right here there's a little pivot point and it gets very narrow. And being able to add that decor piece over the top really strengthens up the arm. Okay, for folding the mechanism for the tag book, what I like to do is orient it with the tag at the top, and then I'm looking for the fold that is in between the tag and the square. It actually goes all the way across the piece, and I like to fold that in both directions. So if you think about this like a chair, now we have the seat of the chair, but we want some armrests. So we're going to pop the armrests to come up in the air. And that's the point where that pivot point right there is going to want to bend. But it's really way back here. Let me push that tag through for a second. So there's a fold back here. That's the end of the armrest, okay? So when you pop that armrest to come up, if you can kind of get in there and work those pivot points, you'd like that armrest to stay nice and straight. And if you accidentally added an extra fold in it, it's not a problem because you're going to add that arm decor piece and that will strengthen it right back up again. For this assembly, the little small tab doesn't matter. It's going to get chopped off eventually, but it would normally just fold to the back. All right, I'm going to do that again with my other piece. So again, orienting it with the tag on top. And in fact, I'm just going to find that armrest fold first and put it back. All right, so right through the middle of the chair, I go one way and then the other. Then I orient it like I'm sitting in a chair, but I need a place for my lemonade, so I'm going to pop the armrest. It's going to want to fold on the pivot point, but don't let it. That armrest should stay straight. Okay, other side. Pop the armrest up. Look at that pivot point. Make sure that it's bending at the pivot point, but the armrest is staying straight. So straight armrest here, straight armrest on the other side. Work those little pivot points at the bottom. And if it does fold on you right there at the pivot point, it's okay because there is that arm decor piece to go over the top and that will stiffen it back up again. Now for adding the arm decor pieces, I do recommend with the long ones that you put the glue on the tag book itself, and that way you can avoid the cutout and you don't have stray glue down there in that cutout area. And then just match the taper of the decor piece to the taper of the arm. And I'm going to go around and put all 8 of them on. I love using glue for pop-ups, so I am using my LINECO neutral pH adhesive in my fine tip bottle. We sell both of those items on our website. Okay, so here's my 2 pieces. Now the small tabs out on the end of the square, those aren't important for this assembly, but with a typical tag book assembly, you would glue those to the other side, and that's what would join the 2 halves of the pop-up together. But that's going to be way too wide for my card. So now I'm going to do an alteration to the mechanism. To shorten the tag book, I'm going to fold right across that pivot point across the square itself. So I'm going to put a score line in it so that I don't do that just manually. And I'm just grabbing a ruler and an embossing stylus. You could use a bone folder. You could get your scoring board out, whatever you want to do to score that. And then what I'm going to do is now fold that square to the back on that new score line I just made that is in line with the pivot points. So when the arms end, the fold starts. Okay, and now I'm going to repeat that process for the other one. So taking my ruler and my scoring tool and just putting the line right from pivot point to pivot point. So when the arm ends, that's where the score line is. And then I just fold that half square to the back. Okay, so now what I have is I have these two panels that can be glued together as a kiss connection. Okay, so just line up the fold from each one and all that area underneath can be glued together. I am going to end up cutting some of it away, so I'm going to focus my glue up here near the fold. So across the upper portion is really the only place that I need the glue because I'm going to end up removing the most of it underneath. So underneath, I can look at those little rounded pivot points. I can look at those rounded corners and I can get those two lined up and glued together. And then to give it good pressure all the way up to the fold, I can go in there and actually mountain fold the squares so that I can really press them together. And now what I have is I have that piece underneath. Now that's way too long. It'll get kind of hung up on the card. So I'm going to take my scissors now and trim a good chunk of it away. So I need to leave some so that it stays connected, but it doesn't have to be a huge tab underneath there. Okay, so now I have shortened the tag book for a card assembly, and I'm going to fold these outer panels underneath the piece. Those are what's going to glue down to the card, just like that. Okay, so just an alteration to the tag book to make it short enough to fit in a card. Now, it's still not short enough because the ends of my tags are going to stick out of the card if I leave them where they are now. Now, if you liked the look of the tags, you just need a little bit wider card to hide them. But I wanted mine to be rectangles, not tags. So what I'm going to do is score across the upper portion of the tag and fold it to the back. Now, I could trim that off. So you could, right here where I'm going to score it, you could just take your scissors and cut that chunk off. I just happen to think that the look of the folded edge is kind of pleasing. So I've decided just to fold it and glue it down on the back instead of cutting it off. But either way works. And it's just basically the end of the tag. So the rounded end and then the first kind of little lump gets folded to the back so that you end up with a rounded rectangle as that panel instead of a tag. Okay, so there is the alteration of the tag book. This is now ready to go inside the card. And you can put that anywhere along the fold, and I'm looking at that beautiful paper at the bottom, wondering if maybe I want to have it a little bit higher than center for this card. So installing that in the card, it's best to do that in the closed position. So you accordion fold it down, and then you have access to the panels. So let me open that back up again and show you from the top. So see how it accordion folds down into a flat position, and then you have those two panels sticking out the end. And those are what glue inside the card. So I can concentrate on the lower one and get that glued in, and then I'll do the upper one. Now, if you followed my dimensions, you can just use the edge of the pattern paper to line up the end of that panel. And then what'll happen is the other one will go to the other side. What I'm doing right now is just trying to figure out where I want this in the card top to bottom. I want to leave myself a little space at the top in case I add a big flower, but then I kind of like that rose right there, so I think I'm going to use the rose as the lineup spot. But, oh, wait a minute. I have a butterfly, so I have to think about the direction of my paper for this one. So let me start over here on this side so that my butterfly will be face up on the right, so I'm glad I caught that. Okay, so it's going to be this side that I'm going to glue down on the left side. So I'm going to add my glue all over that panel. Okay, and then I'm going to flip it over, and the end of it is going to come right to the edge of my pattern paper. And again, I can choose where I want it to go vertically. I've decided just to sit it kind of right on top of that flower that's in the paper on the bottom there, and then I want to glue that panel down. Now, if you're not using pattern paper, then that distance right there is about 1/8 of an inch off the fold. So it's a little bit flexible. You can kind of stretch this pop-up out a little bit or move it in a little bit. It'll just, change the angle of the pop-up, you know, whether it'll be more steep or more shallow. So it's not as precise that it be exactly 1/8 of an inch off the fold, but that does seem to be a nice location for a pleasing pop-up. Okay, adhesive on the other one, and then close the card against it to attach it to the other side. And there you have it. A nice, cool little altered tag book pop-up, shortened so that it'll fit inside a 5x5 square card. And now I get to do all the fun decorating. So I've chosen some items from our newest release to decorate this card. So we have our new Bouquet Bits and Bouquet Sayings clear stamps, and then the Flower Pot add-ons. And then I'm going to go to our Garden Charms. That's a previously released die to get that flower pot with the greenery. So here's a trick that I do sometimes with dies and pattern paper is I'll line up, say, a butterfly die or a flower die right over a butterfly or a flower in the pattern paper, and then I kind of get the decor of that item into my die cut piece without having to do, you know, a lot of inking and shading and things like that. Now, one thing about 49 and Market papers is that the back of their UPC strips is a decorative strip, and I absolutely love this one. So I'm going to cut off this UPC strip and use it as some stripes on my card. One thing about our brand is that there are always really cool decorator pieces just included with the pop-up dies. So don't neglect those pop-up dies when you're looking for decorator dies. In the Pop and Swap, there's a great script, Love You. I'm going to use that. And then my go-to when I need a bunch of circles, a bunch of stars, or a bunch of hearts is the Paper Frames pop-up. So that die that will cut multiple circles is perfect for my flower centers. The tag book pop-up has this beaded rectangle, and so what I've done is cut it out of some of the pattern paper, and then I'm just going to brush a little ink on the inner piece and then put it back together again, and then that'll just add kind of an interesting detail to the inside edge. And then the embellishment I'm creating here is the Love You from the Pop and Swap, one of the larger flowers from the Flower Pot add-ons, and then a glitter flower center cut using that Paper Frames pop-up. And then I just glue that to my left panel of my pop-up, and I just have to make sure that that flower stays in the card. There are all sorts of choices of greetings on that Bouquet Sayings clear stamp set. I chose Happy Mother's Day, and when I die cut that out with the rectangle that comes in the Bouquet Bits, I just made sure to have my greeting higher on the rectangle so that there is room for that pick, that flower pick that comes out of the Bouquet Bits to hold it in my bouquet. So it'll ink around the edges and then slide that in, and then I can glue that down. And of course I can go at whatever angle you like, you know, you can kind of make that customized for your bouquet. So I glue the small heart to the front, and then I'll just add a little glue to get the large heart glued behind the piece. In the Bouquet Bits set, there's also a small heart. Now that heart is sized to fit the small heart on the flower pick and leave just a tiny little shadow around. So for my bouquet, I'm going to combine the flower pot and greenery from the Garden Charms along with 3 little tulips out of the Flower Pot add-ons. And now I can stick that pick down into that bouquet at whatever angle and height that I like. Then I'm also going to add the bow that comes in the Bouquet Bits to the front of the flower pot. So one thing about this alternate assembly is that you have different surfaces to decorate. So I'm going to put the bouquet on the short arms of the pop-up on the right side of the card, and then it's just going to kind of float there in the air. So I just really like the look of all the different levels to this pop-up. And every one of those surfaces can get an embellishment if you choose. You just have to watch the location so that they stay within the card. So I just went around the pop-up adding some flowers and that butterfly and some of the vines out of the Flower Pot add-ons. It's hard to know when to stop, but I think this is going to be good for me. About this level of decor on that pop-up. I've used the beaded square as a place to sign the card. I did the same thing where I just brushed a little ink on the inside square. For card fronts, I'm a big fan of just repeating the elements out of the inside of the card as a simple lead-in and then just using up my leftover materials. So for the little bouquet of tulips, I start with the Garden Charms and I use the built-in stencil feature of that die to add ink to the upper rim, and then I just brush around the edges. And then since I'm not planning on using that as a charm, I can cut off the charm hole. Then there is a greenery piece in the Garden Charms. I've cut that twice out of green cardstock, and then I'm going to use green ink and the stencil feature to add some detailing to the plant. Then I just glue those two greenery pieces together, offsetting them a bit so that I get a nice full plant. And then I can add that to the pot. So 3 flowers out of the flower pot add-ons, and then the bow out of the bouquet bit. So I basically just copied my bouquet from the inside of the card for the outside of the card. And this is such my regular go-to, where I just repeat elements from the inside of the card for the fronts, that I will often, while I'm working on the inside of the pop-up, just go ahead and make a second little embellishment, whatever that thing is, because then I know I can use it on the front of the card. So I have my beaded rectangle from the tag book, just a big piece of the leftover pattern paper. And then all that's left of that UPC strip is this much, but I think I can actually make it stretch by just, skipping the area where the rectangle is. Oh, and just barely, but it did work. And I made full use of that UPC strip on the inside of the card and the outside. And one last little touch for the outside of the card. I realized that I didn't have any of the gold glitter, and I have those little elements sprinkled through the inside. So just to kind of make it match, I decided to cut some more of those hearts out of the bouquet bits, and then I'm just going to add one of those glitter hearts to each of my flowers. So here's what's left from those pattern papers. I really did make full use of them. I used actually very little cardstock, just the blue and then the peach for my card itself. My finished card measures 5 by 5 square, so that can mail in an A7 envelope if you don't want to use a square envelope. So definitely a fun adaptation of the tag book. Let's look back at the inspiration card. Again, you may still be able to get a kit for that baking version. We did some fun things with cookie sheets on that one, but that is basically the same card design, just changed out the embellishments and the theme. With Designer Challenge videos, there is always an associated blog post. You will find the link to that blog post in the description box below this YouTube video. On the blog, you will find photographs of my cards, supply links, as well as links to all of the wonderful bouquet inspiration by our very talented design team. Thanks for watching. If you click on the website link, you'll go to KarenBerniston.com, where you can purchase these dies as well as find links to our other social media accounts. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel and check out some of my other videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.